let's get to the reason we're all here tonight. Tonight's speaker is Idiodi. I'm super excited to have him speak here. He is a partner at Silicon Valley Product Group. I'm sure everyone on the line is familiar with Silicon Valley Product Group, started by Marty Kagan, thought leaders in product management. And before that, he's a product leader at several different companies. Snagajob, CareerBuilder, you guys have probably heard of. Again, his Twitter handle is at CIDIODI. And he's going to be talking to us about knowing what you can't know, enhanced product discovery. So with that, let me let you share the screen and take it over, Christian. Welcome.
Lovely. Well, thanks, Dan. It's really a pleasure to be talking to this community and this group. I love that it's heavily weighted towards more product managers. We don't have to be very nice designers and engineers tonight. We kind of have to talk more to those folks. But I wanted to start by introducing myself, probably a little different than I normally would introduce myself, and maybe talk a little about my career progression. Because like most people, the way we go through our career progression is discovery in and of itself. And since I'm talking about discovery and this mindset of knowing what we can't know, I thought, well, I was just kind of thinking about my journey and what I didn't know through it. Growing up as a child, I've always wanted to be a doctor. I dreamed of curing all of the diseases in the world. I wanted to discover all of the cures to ailments that had plagued generations of humans. I wanted to cure cancer and HIV and all of those kinds of diseases. I played with medical equipment. I moved to the States for college, and I was pre-med. Somewhere in my junior year, I joined a fellowship program put together by Kenneth Cole, the designer, and I had a chance to work on community building and social change issues. And I'm talking about environmental issues, human rights issues, homelessness. And then I had a discovery. I cared about other things beyond being a doctor, right? And I discovered a little more about myself through this. And so rather than going to medical school, I actually decided to take a year off and travel the world. And like every good young teenager, I was broke about 4 months into this year off. And so I had to fly back in the back of a UPS cargo plane back to the States. That's a different story. And when I got back, the fastest way I could make money was to get into sales. And so I actually started some form of professional work in door-to-door sales. And I was selling back then, not just office supplies, I was selling Visa, MasterCard, plastic. To be very clear about what this means, I was going door to door to businesses and telling them there's something that is going to take over the world. People will no longer just pay with cash, they will pay with something called plastic. You should accept plastic. Now, I was a broke teenager and I went through training with people on how to sell. And in my first month as a salesperson, I get a call from a senior executive. I actually thought I was getting fired. So I was like, wow, this is very early for me to get fired. I haven't even got my first paycheck. Well, I got into this meeting and they said, well, sit down. And I said, well, I don't need to sit for this. You can fire me standing. And he said, well, do you know how much a salesperson sells in a month? How many units? I said, I don't know. Well, they said they sell about 20 to 25 units in a month. Well, do you know how many units you sold in your first month being here? I said, I don't really know. I guess a little more than this. He said, well, you sold 113 units in your first month. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Did I make a mistake? He's like, no. I am very curious as to how you did it. I said, well, I was broke and hungry. That was my secret. He's like, no, explain more to me, because this is not like you were just a little overachiever in sales. You were very good at selling these units. I said, well, truly, I was hungry and broke. I knew I needed $500 at the end of the week to pay for rent and to start saving to get a vehicle so that I could continue my career as a sales rep. And when I was going through training, I watched people sell. And I observed very closely that it took a long time. They would go to a business, they will ask for the manager wasn't there, they will set up an appointment, They will have all of this small talk. And at the end of a working day, they will only see 10 businesses. And maybe 1 or 2 decision makers will be there for them to close. And so when I reflected after training, I said, wow, there's no way I make money here unless I could see about 50 businesses every single day. And so during training, I observed the interactions that were going on. And I thought to myself, if I could close a deal in 15 minutes or less, then I could probably see 50 businesses in a day, get about 10 decision makers in place, and try to get to my goal or the income goal that I had. And he said, wow, we've never thought about this. So explain some of the things you did. And I started to walk through the techniques that I used just based on observation. Now, these techniques happen to be a very patented technique used today when you buy things online or on the TV, kind of in home shopping network or QVC. These are impulse-based techniques. The Jones effect, the fear of loss. You see that clock ticking. You kind of tell people they are losing out on a good deal. You tell people everybody else is doing it. And so he said to me, look, you are better off training other salespeople on how to sell in this manner than being a sales rep for me. So I, go ahead and train people, travel up and open stores. And this is kind of how my career evolved to actually training people. Now, I became so good at sales, I forgot all about medical school. Now, fortunately for me, I met someone that had worked with me that joined a company called CareerBuilder. And, they had invited me to meet with some leaders at this company. I learned about the company. I was curious about the sales. I wanted to go back to school too. And they said, look, in this company, we pay for people to get their MBA. We pay for you to, what education you like. I was like, this is a great idea. Now, when I joined the company a couple of months in, I realized the company has a competition. They tell me, well, every year we have this competition. We just started it last year. This is the second year. It's called Ideas from Anywhere. Anybody in the company can submit a business idea. If we like your idea and you win the competition, you get $1 million to run the business. I was like, oh, good for you all. They're like, well, hold on. If you make it just to the top 20, you get like $5,000. If you make it to like the top 10, you get like $10,000. If you win, you even get a cash prize for making it up. I was like, oh, this is a cool competition. I don't have an idea. I don't know anything about this company, the business, the industry, what they do. But I mean, well, if I submit an idea, if I could just make it to the top 20, maybe I could get like that $5,000 cash prize. That would be great. What do I have to lose? Now, probably the last day before the competition closes to submit your idea, I am pressured into thinking, what can I come up with? I start talking to people in the company. I start learning about what they do. And I submit an idea. A couple of months later, I learned I've been selected to do a presentation on the idea. I present the idea, then I make it to the top 20. I'm like, oh, this is great. I have met my goal. This is awesome. I present to the top 20. They're like, congratulations, you're in the top 10. I'm like, okay, this is getting really serious now. I was very happy being in the top 20. Well, it keeps going. They have the finale of the top 5. And this is like American Idol style. You have all of the judges and the panel, and they are going through, they're scrutinizing your plan, your idea, kind of eliminating people as you go. And they do this at a beautiful resort out in Keller, Wisconsin. And I'm there, and, to kind of accelerate this story, I win this competition. I am 23 years old with a check for $1 million to run a business. I have absolutely no clue what I was talking about. I was just trying to win $5,000. Now, I remember the first couple of months trying to run this business. I had written elaborate business plans and tweaked all kinds of documentation about how I was going to change the world with this business. My very first board meeting was a wake-up call for me because, they just started laughing at me in the board meeting. I said, well, what's funny? They said, well, how much of this money have you spent so far? I said, nothing. I have been writing plans of how I will spend the money. They said we would have made a lot more money on interest just putting this money in the bank. It was a risk. You have to go out and try to discover how to make your solution work. I had come up with a technology idea and I had no premise on how to build it, how to run a team, and there was no modern product discipline then. Now, I will talk about more the techniques that I used to grow this business and grow it to millions of dollars and the ideas that came out of it. But this was my first introduction into the world of product. Interestingly enough, I loved coming up with ideas so much that they had me run more of their innovation budget in the company. And I realized, wait a minute, you mean there's a job that just discovers solutions to problems, everything, and just do it? And so I ended up building a couple dozen products at CareerBuilder. I headed up product at a company named Snagajob after that. I'll talk more about that. And now I am a partner at Silicon Valley Product Group. And in the Silicon Valley Product Group, I have a chance to work with remarkable product luminaries like Marty Kagan, Chris Jones, Leah Hickman, John Moore, Martina Luchenko. And all we do is we just share stories of how the best companies in the world work to build products. And we try to convince other companies that they can work in a similar manner or better. Now, part of why I shared a little of my background in this manner, kind of the things I didn't know in this talk, I look back in my career and I come to a frightening conclusion. Most of any of the success that I have had in life came from knowing nothing. But not just knowing nothing, but knowing that I knew nothing was the foundational secret of most of my growth. Now, I love this story of Socrates from Plato's Apology, right? After a meeting with somebody who was considered very wise, he went away and thought to himself, wait a minute, I am wiser than this man, because when we were talking, neither of us really knew anything worth knowing. But he thinks that he knows when he doesn't know. And I, having no knowledge, I do not think that I know. So I may be a little wiser because I do not think that I know what I do not know. And this seems to resonate with me in the search for knowledge and not knowing being the premise of many great discoveries. Now, as I start to look deeply, I see necessity, right? You look at the English proverb, necessity is the mother of invention. It's abstracted from Plato, which roughly means the driving force behind many new innovations is a need, right? And you see it play out. You see it play out with things like vaccines, for example. Vaccines have helped us curb a ton of life-threatening epidemics. It was estimated like over 500 million people died of smallpox alone before vaccines were found. Edward Jenner is credited as the first person to have discovered a vaccine. He invented the smallpox vaccine that saved countless of lives. Perhaps in our moment of need today, with COVID-19 and the coronavirus, the pressure from the need will lead to a discovery of a vaccine. Now, alternatively, you see another driving force for discovery. Robert Hillman, he's an American science fiction author and aeronautical engineer, sometimes called the dean of science fiction writing in some ways, really a pioneer in hardcore science fiction. But he will always say everything is theoretically impossible until it's done. Pretty much impossible only means that you haven't found a solution yet. And this is this whole idea that if it's not driven by need, it is driven by experimentation, right? You look at the automobile. If you look at today's cars, they bear the names of the founders and innovators, Mercedes-Benz, Peugeot, Renault, Dodge. Now, have you ever heard of the Benz bicycle or the Mercedes tricycle or the Dodge bicycle? In fact, all of these companies specialized in bikes before they moved to cars or automobiles. The car industry represents kind of the epitome of incremental innovation. You take a tricycle, you add an engine to it, and you have a car. You look also, say, at the light bulb, right? We give Thomas Edison credit for the light bulb, even though the efforts for the light bulb started way before he did, in the 1800s. But inventions back then were not sustainable. The filament in the bulb will always blow. Now, what did Edison actually really discover? He had tried using something with bamboo that ensured that the light lasted longer. And he created something that was more commercially viable than the alternatives in the market. Simply experimenting and testing, leading to discovery. Now, I go into this historic context because I'm kind of looking at need and experimentation and not knowing driving a need for discovery. I want to be clear because this is important in modern discovery. If you don't know Ed Catmull, co-founder of Pixar, probably one of the few companies in the world I admire a lot, right? They figured out how to make some of the best movies in Hollywood, and it's animation, right? Steve Jobs actually brokered the sale of Pixar to Disney, and he made sure there were two things that were clear. He said, one, ensure that the leadership of Pixar and Pixar stays as it is, don't touch it. And two, let the leadership of Pixar take over Disney Animation Studios. And after they did, the first movie that came out after Disney had a lag was Frozen. My kids love it, and it did very well. And all of the movies coming out after that. But, they use a tech process focused on rapid testing and iterations. His book, Creativity Inc., wonderful, wonderful recommendation, tells this story in an amazing way. He talks a lot about discovery. He actually calls it discovery in it. This is a team, a group that makes movies. They do a ton of testing, qualitative testing, talking to customers. And he says discovery, by the very definition of it, means you do not know the answer when you start. I need this to sink in for many people because I am doing a talk on the premise of not knowing. It's almost become taboo in corporate America to say, I don't know. But if you work in product, by the very definition, your job is to tackle what we do not know. So the most appropriate question and the most appropriate kind of comment or definition of who you are is someone that doesn't know. The cultural shift here is you think about organizations that focus on requirements. What requirements are you gathering? You don't know. That's why we don't do these requirement documents anymore. This is why in many cases, the cultural shift or transformation here is part of this mindset of not knowing. Okay? Now, I want to be clear about how this conceptual model fits in or works, right? The model gives us both sides of the equation, build the product right or build the right product and build the product right. But I want to be clear about how this cascades down. Yeah, the idea here is simple. What problems are we trying to solve? Those are the things here you see as objectives. We have to discover the best solution to those problems. This is what we call discovery. And then we deliver what we have discovered with confidence. This is what we call delivery. Okay? This is the conceptual model here that I want us to understand. It is the responsibility of product management to ensure that what gets built is worthwhile. It is the responsibility of the product organization to discover the solution, the best solution to the problems we've assigned, for our delivery teams to do them with confidence. Now, I also want to be very clear and pointed about what discovery is and what discovery is not. Okay? There's a reason we do discovery. Okay? We do discovery specifically to answer 4 critical questions. And we describe this in Inspired. You've probably heard us talk about this over and over again. The reason I try to beat this down is because in many organizations, discovery becomes like a 4-letter word very quick, because it almost means everything. This idea of not knowing, right? And it's like, what are you discovering? I don't know. How long does it take? Forever. What are you looking for? Everything, right? But to the extent that you're trying to uncover a solution to a problem, there are 4 risks in the modern technology organization that we have to tackle. And discovery in our world today is all about answering those questions. Will they buy it? That's value. Or will they choose it if it's free? That's value. Can they use it? That's usability. Can our stakeholders support it? Does our business support it? Does it work for our business? That's viability. Can we build it? Do we know how to build it? Do we have the skills to build it? Do we have the time to build it? How do we build it? This is feasibility. We answer these 4 questions with evidence. And then we describe what we want to build. This is the essence of why we do discovery in the modern technology world. Because upfront, through this, we are identifying the realm and the parameters of the questions that we do not have answers to, of the things we do not know. And we have to establish, using techniques, ways we can uncover those answers with evidence so that we can properly and adequately describe what we want to deliver with confidence. Now, there are many discovery techniques we use to answer those questions with evidence. Many of these techniques we teach to companies. We advocate here at Silicon Valley Product Group, techniques that you use to frame and start your work, planning techniques in executing discovery, techniques that we use to come up with ideas for what to do, the master technique of going fast and quick, prototyping techniques, and all the variants of leveraging engineering and getting a live data prototype and proving concepts. And then we gather evidence of this by testing. How do we know that it's valuable? We test value. How do we know that it's usable? We test usability. How do we know it works for our business? We test viability. We understand what's going on, why people want it, what they want, and even if they wanted it in the first place. Now, I have spent hours thinking about all of these techniques, and there are lots of techniques out there. But I started to think to myself, if I were a CIA agent-like product manager, right? And I was trying to have an enhanced discovery technique. If I only had a limited amount of time and I needed to get answers fast, which of these techniques do I use? How do I manipulate them, put them together? How do I get answers quickly? I have a short window of time to tackle those risks, a short window of time to gather those answers with evidence. And so I started to explore this concept even deeper. The first thing I did, I started to think about, where do good ideas even come from in the world, and how does it work? It's a great book I stumbled upon called Where Do Good Ideas Come From, written by Steven Johnson. And I looked at the principles that drove innovation in the past, right? These principles drove all the good ideas in history. You know, one is, what new possibilities are there today that didn't exist a year ago or yesterday? Remember, innovation is really a factor of how many attempts you have and technology that is just now available, right? New tech that we didn't have yesterday, we have today. We can solve a problem in a new way, in a meaningful way. Innovation, creating new sources of value or solving a problem in a new way. This is the principle of adjacent possibilities. The second one is the principle of slow hunches. What hunches have you had for some time about what to do? Many people believe ideas happen in this eureka moment. Oh, boo, I just figured it out. I know exactly what we're going to do. You know, eureka, a big flash. Actually, the studies indicate the opposite, right? As people share their thoughts, they build on them, and the better they progress. Your slow hunch turns into what people may deem as your eureka moment. What fresh eyes do you have looking at it? This is the principle of liquid networks. The more perspectives you have looking at a problem, the newer and fresher the perspective, the more likely you come up with a more compelling solution to it. You also have the principle of serendipity. You know, builds on surprises or chance happenings, but this is what worked that surprised us. There's the principle of error. What are the biggest learnings we have from our errors? Many innovations have come from those things. You also have this principle, which is kind of what other purpose or service can something existing today be used for? This principle of exaptation, right? The feather of a bird evolved for warmth, and then it turned into wings. That's kind of that concept. And then finally, you kind of have this platform principle. What successes can we build upon? What leverage can we take from other things? It's kind of these principles truly drive a tremendous amount of innovations in the world. Now, I also spend time reading through a list of inventions and discoveries because I like that kind of stuff, right? I couldn't find a single process, a master technique, some way that all of the great cool things were invented from. It was just not one fluid, straight process to them. But there were a couple of things that looked to be consistently true for how these things came about. One, there was always kind of like an immersion in a customer's environment. Remember vaccines? You are like sitting down there looking at people die around you. You're like, oh, I need to do something about it. You have access to people, you see the problem. It allows you to easily visualize and deconstruct the problem space. People thinking, how did the compass get invented or the wheel? This thing's driven by need, but you're immersed in the environment where the problem persists. Most of this came from such a good definition of the problem. I also saw a wild range of unstructured experimentation. Remember the light bulb? They were experimenting with bamboo instead of paper to hold the light longer. New existing problem, different ways. You hear all the stories of failure through that, but more really learning that happened through that. It often appears that this wild, unstructured experimentation led to natural pivots. Nobody actually called whatever they were doing a pivot back then. I know we all love the term now. They're like, yes, if we don't find it, we pivot. But almost every discovery in our term today will look like a pivot, but they didn't respond that way. It was just like a natural consequence of not knowing. It's like they chose deliberately not to know, so a pivot was actually a direction. It just naturally, it's like I just started walking and the road formed under me. Now, I also wanted to think about the reasons most discovery efforts fail in our environment today. Let me talk about this. And we talk about some of this in our book, Inspired. But those were things that I was curious about before I started to think about enhanced discovery techniques. I said, well, we're trying different techniques, but they all seem to struggle in different ways. You know, let me walk you through some of these pitfalls. The first one is confirmation-based discovery. I have a solution that I love. I have fallen in love with what I think we're going to do, and I am just going to discover people that agree with me. I'm going to run around. I'm going to talk to a customer. if any customer that doesn't agree with me is probably not the right customer. I just want people to confirm that this is the right thing to do because I love it. Okay. You also have this idea of product as a prototype. I do get people that fall in love with their MVP, right? And it's actually a test, a technique designed for you to validate all of this quickly. It's an experiment, not a product. I joke with people, if it takes more than 2 sprints, it is not an MVP. It's a half-baked product. And so you product as a prototype and it takes too long, you start over-engineering and start building in this manner. You also get this idea of over-processified discovery. It no longer feels natural like the old days, right? I look back at all these scientific discoveries, manufacturing discoveries in life. They didn't really have this, it was very unstructured. They knew they didn't know and they had to discover answers to the questions they had. This is not about phase 1, step 2, technique 1, technique 2. You also get the question of who is participating in discovery. You get partial team discovery, product manager and design, no engineering. Product and engineering, no design in it. You get one-dimensional discovery. We only use quantitative techniques. We do A/B testing for everything. We don't talk to customers here. We just test at the end of doing things. We have to use qualitative and quantitative techniques. It's not only good enough to know what's happening, we have to know why it's happening. Then you have Big Bang discovery. None of these discoveries actually happen in Big Bang. We say, we will answer all of your questions on October 1st, 2021. I get teams today that do waterfall discovery and agile delivery, right? It is a continuous learning process. And then finally, this idea of outsourced discovery. People give other groups or teams. I'm not a fan of outsourced delivery, so I'm definitely not a fan of outsourced discovery. You're making your own self a mercenary. Other people telling you what to do. Now, obviously, there are other discovery challenges, like pet projects that might come in, how people fund projects. I am paying you. I'm going to tell you what to do in that way. There are all these barriers, but it occurred to me that just our traditional techniques, they tend to falter under pressure. And so I started to think to myself, if I, again, were this CIA product manager agent, what kind of enhanced discovery technique would I use to answer my questions quickly? And I realized I will have to recreate some of the same conditions that led to the best discoveries in the world. I will have to be very immersed with the customer. I will have to create pressure because I am so connected to the problem. I will have to naturally and organically evolve my thinking and leverage the tool sets and expertise I have to try to solve the problem. And so the best technique for this enhanced discovery that I found is probably the oldest technique that we have in discovery, which is called the customer development program, or the customer discovery program, or the reference customer program or technique. Now let's talk about this. And I want to go deep into this technique so that we can tangibly see how we can leverage it in our day-to-day work. This technique was made popular by a gentleman named Steve Blank. Okay, he wrote the book, The 4 Steps to Epiphany. Epiphany was his final business, by the way, and it was focused on B2B enterprise software, right? It is really a great how-to book on product market fit. What knowing, Eric Ries, the author of the Lean Startup, was a student of Steve Blank as well. It's not necessarily the easiest read, but the goal here is to truly extract the premise here. In his book, right, he says, the single reason for his success in all of the 4 companies that he had successfully was this single technique, right? Remember, in software product management, there's no way of knowing if you're going to hit a home run, but you can know if you're going to strike out. And honestly, most people do strike out. The whole goal of this technique is to discover and develop a set of reference customers. At the same time, you're discovering and developing your product. Steve attributes all of his success to this technique, which is an oversimplification, but I'm going to explain it more. But he was amazed how few people could understand this, right? His argument is like, no facts exist inside the building, only opinions, and teams must get out of the building. The argument here is that if you get out of the building or the office of your space and you spend time with real customers, with a real problem you have to solve, and you do not stop until you solve or create a solution for them, then your chances of succeeding are exponentially higher than if you were developing it in a vacuum. This is the pressure cooker of all techniques. Now, many people don't do it well, and many people will say, look, this technique only works for big ideas, new products and stuff. I have used this for almost everything that I do. New startup business, new ventures. Yes, I don't like it on small, tiny optimization features because it's a heavy technique and you don't need to discover a new solution. But I want to walk us through some of the guiding principles around this technique so that we can understand why it truly helps us accelerate discovery. Now, the goal here is to create a reference customer. It's an output called a reference customer. Now, what is a reference customer? You know, Jeffrey Moore in his book, Crossing the Chasm, you kind of talked about this concept called early adopters. This is the same version here, but you know, a reference customer is somebody that has the problem that you're trying to solve. They really have the problem. They are using a solution that you provided them. They are really using the solution. It's not fake, right? And they love it enough to tell other people about it. They are saying, you've solved my problem in a meaningful way, which is the meaning of value, that I am going to tell other people, hey, if you have this problem, here is a solution. Now, we target these people called early adopters or early evangelists. And to make it clear why this moves or works, if I said to you, all right, let's go for dinner. Find me a great sushi place. You opened up your iPhone or your Android phone and you typed in sushi places by me. And a restaurant comes up and you see the restaurant has only one review. What do you think? Well, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable going here. Not a lot of people have said anything. And maybe this one review comes from the manager or maybe the manager's wife or their friends or family just trying to make them feel good. The premise here is that for the early majority and the late majority to move, to create adoption of your product, they need to see other people using it first, right? Now, these are not your technologists, okay? I want to make sure I'm clear about that. They are, you know, technologists are people that the new iPhone is coming out, the iPhone 12 is coming out with, you know, and then they get a prototype or they get early reviews of the iPhone 12, then they write a review. iPhone 12 is coming out. It is amazing. 5 gig of RAM, 4 cameras. It is awesome. It moves super fast. They write a nice little TechCrunch article. Those are your technologists. Your early adopters are the people that say, well, my current iPhone 11 has 3 cameras and I don't look so good in this iPhone. But the new one has 4 cameras. Boy, I am going to look really nice in 4 cameras. I can't wait. I am going to go line up at the Apple store. I am going to wait in line because I can't wait to get my hands on 4 cameras. Those are the people you want. Because not only do they have the pain, but if it works for them, they're going to tell people about it. Now, let me be clear about why this is so magical in our world. Okay? The whole goal here is to only identify 6, maybe no more than 8 B2B customers, or 25 if you're doing B2C early adopters. You see, what you're doing is you're going to pressure yourself to solve the problem for just 6 people if you're doing B2B enterprise, or 25 people if you're doing B2C. You agree, these people agree, like, I have the problem, you are offering me a solution to the problem. In exchange, I'm going to give you permission to be immersed in my world because you really want to solve my problem. They agree to be a reference. You do all of your discovery and all of your delivery in the context of these customers. The reason this is magical, okay, is because this is your definition of product market fit. It is the best definition that I have out there because it comes really organically. You're saying to yourself, the smallest product that meets the needs of these 6 people or these 25 people is what I will build in production. I can't think of a better definition. Now, let me make sure I'm clear about some considerations. To be clear, okay, we're trying to come up with one solution for all 6 partners or all 25 partners. This is critical. If not, you're doing customizations or specials. If you're saying, I am building an app for women in Idaho, then your app is for women in Idaho. You need 6 women in Idaho or 25 women in Idaho. If you want to now go to people in New York, you need to get another 6. Because you're trying to ensure you have a product. You're solving a problem, value, for a target customer, your market. You don't do things. If somebody says to you, one of the 25 says, I want your app to be read. Great idea. But if all 25 don't say they want it to be read, you don't do it. You only do things that every single person wants. So all partners must come from the same target market. The solution is what fits all of them. The reason this technique is magical as well is because recruiting is a demand signal. How do you know a problem is worth solving? If you can't find 6 people that have the problem or 25 consumers that have the problem, maybe there really is not a problem. Maybe you actually haven't defined the problem. This is important. You see, what I'm doing with this pressure technique is I'm immersing you in the environment. You're not making up the problem. You're saying, look, we are setting out to solve this problem. You're asking people that have the problem to define it. If you can't recruit people that say, I have the problem and it's meaningful enough that I'm going to give you the time to try to solve it for me, you have a demand problem up front. Okay? You can use current customers or new customers. It doesn't matter. Current customers are great. They're friendly and they're good for you. That's great. Okay? Now, I want us to think about this critically because, you know, if your product is a paid product, the people in this program have to pay for it because you're solving their problem. If it's free, then it's free. You're not asking people, I'm going to pay you or give you an incentive in exchange for you being a reference. Now, part of why this pressure cooks our discovery in an enhanced technique is because, remember I talked about the questions you're trying to answer in discovery. Is it valuable? Is there really a problem here? What's the problem? What's the best solution to the problem? Is this the right solution to the problem? You can discover it. Will people choose it or use it? You can discover it because you have real customers, right? How is it going to work? How do we build it? You can discover it because you're immersed with real customers. The other question here is, does it work for our business? It's not good enough just to build products customers love, but does it work for our business? I love this technique because you have internal partners that can work with you through this. You're going to need support from different departments, marketing, sales, legal, but you know what's different here? In discovery with 6 B2B customers or 25 customers trying to get product market fit, you don't have to make things up. You are literally saying, I don't know. What do customers think about your product? I don't know. Ask them. Sales, how do we sell this product? I don't know. Try to sell to them. Marketing, how do we market this product? I don't know. Ask the customer. Legal, are there any concerns or risk? Well, I have 25 customers that have the problem. I have to look through their, validate it with them. We don't have to make up what value is, what our pitch is, what our position is. We have an active group we can test in a safe environment. These people are working with you because the problem is meaningful enough for them and your solution is compelling enough for them to switch. This works in B2B, it works in B2C, it works in platform too as well. All right, I want to give you an example here before I wrap up here of this technique as well. Now, I joined the company Snagajob, and this company is in the hourly space. They help people find jobs. And I get a call here from the head of staffing at Starbucks. Now, I know this company because I've used this technique at CareerBuilder, my previous company. So I've built some great relationships with customers. And they say, well, when we have a problem, these are the people we call, right? And he said, well, we have a problem. And I said, well, okay. Don't we all have problems? Tell me your problem. He said, well, we just bought a company in the Bay Area. And as we're doing the paperwork on this company, we realized that maybe close to 800 of the employees in this bakery that we bought may be illegal or undocumented workers. I'm like, oh, you may really have a problem here. He's like, yeah, and you know that if this breaks out into the news, it's bad press, it's not good for us. And the second we take over this company and start to get papers, everybody will leave, right? And so he's like, well, I said, well, this looks like a serious problem. You're going to pay money to solve this problem? He's like, yeah, I don't know how much we're going to pay, but it's a serious problem. I said, will you pay $1 million? No, I don't think so. What about 300,000? He's like, maybe. I said, oh, okay. Now I went to my CEO. I don't need permission, but I'm getting buy-in. Hey, someone here has a problem. I really have no clue about this problem. I don't know. I took a designer, I took an engineer, and we locked ourselves in a room. And I just described to them the call I had. Now, our first question is, what really is the problem here? We start to think around with it. We try to describe it. We say, well, at the end of the day, Starbucks needs to hire a high volume of people in a short window of time. Because the second they take over this company, they are going to lose 800 employees and they need to hire people fast. We're like, well, this seems like the problem here. Well, who else has this problem? I don't know. Do you know, designer? Do you know, engineer? We don't know. Well, what are we doing here? We all jump in my car and we just start driving around town. We're looking at businesses. We're looking at things. Does that business have this problem? Who else could have this problem? We are thinking outside the office because no facts exist inside the building. Now, as we're driving, we see a new construction site. Fortunately for us, we go there, the operations director for McDonald's, they are building a brand new McDonald's. We go over there and say, hey, look, tell us about starting a new McDonald's. And he says to us, well, it is really a pain. We need to hire 120 people to open up a new McDonald's. We're like, what? 120 people? He's like, yes, because half of them don't even show up to work on the first day. We're like, whoa, we didn't know that. See, we're discovering more about the problem. It's like, and let me tell you, we lose money every single day we're doing this because we are constructing, because we don't have customers coming in. So the second we're done with the toilets, we open up the new McDonald's. So we need to hire people fast the second we're ready to go. We're like, wow, look at this. A new McDonald's opening up also has this problem of hiring a lot of people very quickly. We get back in the car, we're driving around, we go to the mall, we're talking to customers, we talk to Macy's. Macy's tells us, well, do you know in holiday season, we have to hire like 1,000 people for our stores because people love to shop and we have to be open nights and weekends. And we do that all around the country. We're like, boy, it really seems like there's a problem here. We just discovered a problem. So we go back to the office. We're like, how will people even solve this today? We map out the steps that we're hearing from different people. Now we say that McDonald's guy looked very desperate. So we call the McDonald's guy up and we say, look, thanks for talking to us. We saw you need to hire lots of people. We would love to solve that problem for you. Hey, you know, how about we send you a couple of people for you to interview the next week? He's like, oh, okay. How do I pay for this? I don't know. We don't know. How about you pay us for everybody you hire? He's like, sure. Now we get back the engineer, the designer. We're all talking through how do we solve this problem? We start to deconstruct the problem space. We are immersed. We say, oh, we post ads in the newspaper. We advertise on different job boards. We walk through the week. We get about 40, 50 people on a list. We feel great about this. We call the manager up. We will be sending you people to interview the next week. We send people. We show up there the next week. We are expecting 5 people to show up at 9 o'clock. 9:30, nobody shows up. By 10 o'clock, only 1 person shows up. We're like, what's going on? Is there traffic? 10 o'clock, we expect another 5. Only 1 person shows up. At the end of the day, less than 20 people show up for this interview. He hires maybe 4 and 5. We are like, this is a disaster. We couldn't even solve this problem. We're like, let's just go apologize to the man. We are going to apologize. He's laughing. He's like, look, I forgot to tell you. They don't even show up for interviews as well. This is hourly work at McDonald's. Look, they leave us for 25 cents and go to another company. We're like, wow, we didn't know this. We go back to the office, the engineer, the designer, we're deconstructing our learnings of the day. It seemed like he hired about 1 in 4. About half of them showed up for the interviews. So if we really want to help him hire people, we've got to send him a higher volume of people, qualify those people so that he can hire more people. We call him back up and say, can we try again? He's like, sure. Do I only pay for those that I hire? It's like, yeah. He's like, okay. So we try again. And we double our efforts. We advertise. Let me be clear. The engineer and the designer, we are concierge doing the work ourselves. We don't have technology. We're trying to solve the problem. We're immersing ourselves in the customer's precious situation. We are not drawing up or writing a spreadsheet or a master plan of what the problem is and the process. We are living it. Manually living it. We double our efforts. We call people up to remind them for interviews. We schedule over 200 people for him. He has this event. 80 people show up. He hires over 40 people. He walks up to us. This is super fantastic. Great job. You guys are awesome. I will use you for my next store opening. We're like, oh, this is great. What do we know at this point? We only know we can solve a problem for a McDonald's manager opening up a new store. We need other people involved in this. So we say, well, we've learned a little here. Let's go back to Starbucks. We go back to Starbucks. I call the guy up. I say, look, we want to take a stab at solving your problem. You need to hire about 800 people. He's like, yes, we think we need to schedule close to 3,000 people for interviews. He says, what? 3,000 people? We're like, yes. These people don't show up for interviews, right? He's like, oh, yes. You know our industry very well. I will give you the opportunity to solve this problem. The designer and the engineer, we fly down to San Francisco to be with the customer in the environment. We're recruiting locally. We run this event in 1 week. Starbucks hires 784 people in 1 week. I get an email the next Monday morning from the then head of staffing. He copies the CEO of Starbucks, then Howard Schultz. These guys just saved our butt. That was the quote. I said, wow, we have uncovered a problem and we have uncovered a solution to it. But we've only worked now for McDonald's and Starbucks. We need more. Interestingly enough, the next opportunity we saw was like the Los Angeles International Airport. They said, we are opening up a new terminal. We need to hire 200 people. We're like, 200 people? We just hired 700 people for Starbucks, man. We can do this. And then we get to the first briefing. They say, well, there's some nuance with the airport. The demographic of the employees at the airport have to match the demographic of the international travelers. Well, I explain that. Well, if we have 12% Korean speaking, you have to have 12% Korean speaking employees. We're like, huh? What are you talking about? You have to have 6% Chinese speak. We're like, this is a disaster. We flew to LA. We were in Chinatown recruiting. Let me tell you, this was a disaster of a solution. If we expected 10 people to show up, one person showed up. People didn't come for interviews. We started calling up job seekers. Why are you not coming? They say, wait, do you know what it means to work at an airport? First of all, I have to wake up at 5:30. I have to drive to the employee parking lot, get into the employee bus, drive to the airport. I have to get through security. They will take off all of my things. I have to go in. If I want to go out for a drink, I have to go through security again. And then you're going to pay me minimum wage for this? We had to do several iterations of this before we could finally work with them to raise the price to like $14 an hour to get people to come and work at the airport. We looked at the cost, we looked at the value, we said, this is not the right target market for us. We discovered what we should not do as we were discovering the solution of what we're doing. By this time, Macy's is holiday hiring season. We work with Macy's. We work with some other brands like Chipotle. I want to explain, the engineer, the designer, they are observing the process of us trying to solve this problem. Under pressure, they are using technology to accelerate, to improve, to innovate, to solve the problem in a new way. We are leveraging all these tools, but we have enhanced the technique under the pressure of the discovery program. We are building, the engineer is building. It's like, well, we are calling people, let's build a technology for it. Okay? When we built this solution and launched it, it did extremely well in its first 90 days. They had to hire more salespeople to do it. But this is us discovering and developing the product, at the same time discovering and developing the customer. I want to be clear, this technique is used B2B, B2C everywhere. Open Table used it when they started. They went around to find people that had open tables at 7:30, which is the prime time. And then it's like, can I bring you customers at 7:30? Of course, you say, solve the problem for me. Symantec, Bizarre Voice, B2B or platform teams. Apple, the tools team, the back-end platform teams. This is how they replace the Genius Bar, and they build technology from it. Backbox, if you've never heard of Backbox, it is a company that does a subscription service for your dogs. So every month, your dogs will get a box of treats and toys. When they started to use this technique, they found people that, do you love your dog? Wouldn't it be cool if I send them a box of treats? They found out that people were canceling after the first month. But those that stayed for like 90 days, they loved it. They were like, this is the best thing ever. Why is this happening? Under pressure, they could uncover in the technique that right around 90 days, the dogs started to recognize the box. So when the box arrives, the dogs are jumping and backing and wagging their tail, and you're like, I am the best owner ever. As a product team, you can imagine asking yourself, what if we gave away the product for free for the first 90 days so that the dogs can recognize the box and we can get adoption? Alternatively, what if we made the dogs recognize the box faster? And so they tried that. They sprayed the box with nice smelling treats and toys. And this increased the adoption rate, because you can imagine if you launched the product or built it, in your first month, you think you have a bad business, but you're discovering the product at the same time discovering the customer. Okay, I know I just went through this technique really quickly. I wanted to pull it out here, but I want to make sure I'm cautioning people that in modern technology, these techniques only work when a couple of things are present, right? The first one is strategic context, because in some ways you have to know that you're solving the right problems, right? Product strategy helps us decide which problems we solve. Team objectives and things like the OKR technique is how we assign those problems to teams. Discovery is the technique of us discovering the best solutions to those problems. And delivery is how we bring that solution to market. So the assumption here is that you have context to do it. The second piece is that you've got to work in an empowered team. All right? Now, what is an empowered team? Cross-functional group of people assigned problems to solve. They are accountable, coming up with the best solution to this problem, right? And they are measured on the outcome, the why, the business results. This has to be true. And then finally, like my good favorite show that I'm immersed now with my whole family on, Lean Manuel by means of Aaron Bohr, you got to consider who is in the room when it happens. If you think about my story and my narrative, I emphasized design and engineering involved in the room. I didn't hand over the problem to them. They were involved in identifying and defining the problem, as well as validating the solution to the problem, as well as coming up with the solution to the problem. No handoffs. I didn't have to tell one other person what to do. We built this together. This has to be true. Now, Stanford Business School will say, prototype as if you know you're right, but test as if you know you're wrong. I talk about discovery from this concept of not knowing, and you have to interrogate yourself towards knowledge. This Arabian quote always sticks with me. He who knows not and knows that he does not know is a fool. Ignore him, shun him. He who knows not and knows that he knows not is a student. Teach him. Part of the product management mindset. He who knows and knows that he's not a no, he's just asleep, wake him up. And he who knows and knows that he knows is wise, follow him. The whole premise of this talk was driven by one of the best product thinkers of our generation, Mark Andreessen, who will always say the most important thing is to know what you can't know. And I say this to product managers all the time. Your job is to know what you can't know and to admit when you don't know and to bridge the gap between not knowing and knowing. Andreessen argues this is all about humility. As a product team, we need to know what we don't know. Humility is an important attribute, and ego destroys a lot in our industry. It is okay not to know, because this is the reason and the purpose for your being in your job. This has been extremely fun. Thank you all for the opportunity to share with you. Thanks for all of those that have supported SVPG and our work. Please keep in touch. Thanks again for the time. Dan, over to you.
Yeah, Christian, great. Thank you so much. I didn't know we were going to have so much philosophy. This is awesome. I love it. Great talk. Very great talk. Yeah. And I see in the bottom right, just so people might be subtle, the next book from Marty is coming out, Empowered. So Christian touched a little bit on empowered teams. There's a whole book coming out, Empowered. Marty Kagan wrote it with help from Chris Jones. It's coming out in December. You can pre-order it on Amazon already. So I know a lot of people are eager to get it. So if you didn't know about it, now you know about it. Awesome talk, Christian.